Hey guys, Mrs. Horn here. Today I'm going to walk you through notes for your evolution packet on pages 4, 5, and 6. Our focus is on evidence for evolution, and I'm going to give you 10 different examples of things that support the idea of evolution. The first two things I'm going to talk about are very current case studies that we are collecting evidence on today. The first thing I want to talk about is the soapberry bug, and a soapberry bug is a bug that has, well, they call it a beak, but it looks like its mouth, and they eat fruit. They eat fruit from a balloon vine, and I have an extra picture down here that you don't have in your packet, but the balloon vine produces fruit that looks like this, and the balloon vine fruit is very round, and there are seeds in the center of the fruit, and this soapberry bug sticks the beak all the way into the center of the fruit, and it can retrieve all of the seeds, and that's what it eats. Now, any bugs that have short beaks, they can't get to the seeds. So up until now, any soapberry bugs that have had a short beak have actually been selected against, and we haven't seen many of those in the recent data collection of soapberry bugs. However, because these bugs have been eating a lot of the balloon vine fruits, that fruit is becoming not so common. And these bugs are left to search for other food sources. What they have found is they found this type of fruit. It's a golden rain tree fruit, and it's a very obvious difference in shape. It's not as round. It's actually thinner, more narrow. It also has seeds in the middle, and that's why the soapberry bug likes to eat it, but the seeds aren't as deep. So now the bugs that have the shorter beaks have an easier time retrieving the seeds. The bugs that have the longer beaks, when their beak goes into the fruit, their beak actually goes past the middle. So they're not retrieving the seeds. So now the bugs that have the longer beaks, those are the ones that are being selected against. And the shorter beaks is proving to be a more beneficial trait because of the food source that's available. Shorter beak is more prominent in the population. So for your conclusion here on page 4, the conclusion is that the population has actually shifted to have more shorter beaked soapberry bugs. The next very modern example of how evolution is still occurring is dealing with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. In the 1940s, scientists developed a drug called penicillin, and it was awesome, and everybody loved it. And anytime you had a bacterial infection, they would give you penicillin, and it would kill all the bacteria. However, that was the only antibiotic we had at the time. So 2 years later, some of those bacteria were not dying. They discovered that 20% of the bacterial population was actually resistant to penicillin. They had mutated and were actually creating an enzyme that would destroy the penicillin. So it was like a protective barrier they had built for themselves, all because of a mutation in their DNA. So we have made new antibiotics since then. We've got a bunch of them. We have ampicillin, amoxicillin, and what has happened also is that bacteria are now developing new resistances to those new antibiotics. And all it is a change in their DNA, and the DNA makes either a new enzyme or more of an enzyme, or maybe not an enzyme, and the bacteria is now resistant. In 1959, methicillin was used to deactivate a protein that was used to make their cell walls, and that's an antibiotic, and it was a unique way to kill the bacteria. But then shortly after that, the bacteria mutated once again and mutated to make their cell walls using a whole different protein. Today, bacteria that causes infections of our skin, our lungs, and our blood is resistant to many of our antibiotics. The picture that I have at the bottom of my page, which you do not have, but here's a picture of a very simple bacteria cell. This is a non-resistant bacteria, and that bacteria is going to divide by mitosis, and now we have a bunch of bacteria, and they should all be genetically the same, but you'll notice that there's a couple in there that actually have a mutation. And in this example, that mutation is the ability to be resistant to drugs. As they multiply, we're going to add some antibiotics. Maybe it's strep throat, maybe it's an ear infection. And the antibiotics are going to do a number on most of the bacterial cells here, except the two that have that awesome mutation. Awesome for them, not so great for us. Those are going to live, they're going to reproduce, they're going to make more identical copies of themselves, and now we have a complete population of bacterial cells that are all resistant to the antibiotics. The next three pieces of evidence for evolution are different types of structures. The homologous structures, and that's what this picture is on the side, homologous structures are built the same but have different functions. So if you look at the pictures over here, everything is color-coded. So everything with the orange bone, that's the exact same bone. The exact same bone in the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat. But obviously, all of those bones have very different uses in each of those four organisms. So it's built the same, it is the same bone, but its function is very different in all of those organisms. Another structure is a vestigial structure. A vestigial structure is something that is no longer in use. Good examples of this for the human. Your tailbone is a vestigial structure. It is believed that that is the last remaining component of a once tail. Other vestigial structures, appendix, wisdom teeth, tonsils, these are all things that a lot of humans have, but they're not necessary for survival. Some scientists believe that maybe humans in the future may be born with certain mutations that their bodies don't even make those things anymore because they don't really help us in any way. And the third type of structure is an analogous structure. An analogous structure is something that has the same function, but it is built differently. And an example, and I don't have a picture of it here, but an example would be anything with wings. So think of if you compare an insect to a bird. So a butterfly compared to an eagle, they both have wings. They are both used to fly. But if you look at the inside of those structures, they are built very differently. An eagle will have bones and feathers, and the butterfly is made up of the exoskeleton. Something else we can look at to gather some evidence of evolution is organisms in their embryological stage. So I'm looking at a chick embryo compared to a human embryo. There's a lot of similar structures there. They look the same shape. If you were to cover up which one was the chick and which one was the human, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. If you were to throw an alligator, an elephant, a lizard in here, all of those embryos look very, very identical. So a good definition for the embryological homology, these are similar structures in the early development of an organism. When comparing the molecular structure of organisms, if there are similarities in DNA, that is considered a molecular homology. So all you have to write on this line for this piece of evidence of evolution is DNA. When we are comparing their similarities and differences at the molecular level, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at DNA, we're looking at their amino acids, we're looking at what enzymes they have. Convergent evolution is where unrelated organisms that live in two totally different parts of the world have actually evolved similar features due to similar environments. And a great example of this, I have a sugar glider here that is from Australia, and I have a flying squirrel that's from over here in North America. They do not share a common ancestor. Their ancestors are not related, but because of the environment that they both live in, the mutations that those organisms have had over the years, the same types of mutations have proven to be beneficial, and those were the ones that were passed on. So even though they don't have a common ancestor, they look very similar because the environment has actually pushed certain mutations to be the ones that were most useful. When looking at fossils, we can get another grasp on evolution and the evidence for it, and our fossil record shows changes in groups of organisms. So we're looking at there's a bunch of different mammals here. So we have a dog, we have a pig, we have a deer, and this bone from the dog looks very similar to these other groups of hooved animals. So there are many similarities when looking at fossils. And the last piece of evidence for evolution is biogeography, and we're going to do some activities on this in class tomorrow, specifically related to island biogeography. But biogeography is the geographic distribution of organisms. If you think back to earth science, you learned about Pangaea, and maybe you called Pangaea the supercontinent, but this is when all continents on Earth were somewhat combined and kind of all shoved into one another, and it was a single continent. And from there, continental drift and plate tectonics and earthquakes and the movement of the Earth's crust has moved all those continents into their current location. But because they were once together, the movement of organisms can be kind of trailed back to when they were once one continent. Another term I need you to be familiar with here is the word endemic. And endemic means that an organism is found nowhere else in the world. And this is very specifically related to our island biogeography. So when we talk about things on the Galapagos Islands or on the Hawaiian Islands or the Canary Islands, those are all islands that were formed by volcanic activity. They are far enough off of the coast of a mainland where the organisms that are there are not found anywhere else in the world.